So I've got a confession. Fruit trees make me really happy, especially when they're wild. I'm up in a loquat tree right now. You can see them right there. Oh, one dropped. Hey, so good. So I wanted to introduce you all to one of my favorite fruits today. It's called jackfruit. I believe it's the biggest fruit in the world. It grows up to 80 pounds. And in San Francisco, I'm lucky that I can get jackfruits pretty easily. I bought this from a corner market in the Mission. And the way I tell if it's a good jackfruit is first it has to smell. It has to smell like juicy fruit gum. The second is kind of the amount of give it has to it. So if it's too stiff, it's probably not going to be good. And then I look at the color, and this one had a lot of kind of yellow coloring to it. And really you want it to get pretty brown before it ripens, but this one's gotten pretty brown, but it's a little green still. But I know it's ready because if I look toward the top, I see that it's molding a little bit. And same over here, there's a mold spot. And as soon as it starts molding, that's, in my experience, when you've got to cut it. Because if you don't, too much of it is going to rot. So I'm going to break this down for you and time-lapse it. And so that's what's involved in cleaning a jackfruit. This will probably last me like a day and a half. It's 25-pound jackfruit. It's pretty tasty. Yeah. So the topic I want to discuss today is raw honey. So when I started going on a vegan diet, I cut out meat, I cut out eggs, I cut out dairy. But I actually left in an animal product. I left in honey. And I think part of that was because I didn't know much about it. There are a lot of people extolling its benefits and various healing qualities, but there aren't many people talking about problems that they have with honey. So for about, I'd say 13 months into being a vegan, I was still eating honey. It's not a vegan product, but for me, I was vegan at that point because all the major animal products were out of my diet entirely. And I wasn't really sure if I wanted to keep eating it or not. I couldn't find much ethical implications of honey. There's not a lot online about that. I couldn't find a lot of health science about it. So I was really confused. I was like, geez, what am I going to do? I was really enjoying it as a sweetener, and I didn't want to use like maple syrup or like a more processed agave. I didn't know about fruit-based veganism at this point. So what I'd do to try to stay raw is I'd start the morning with a bowl of oats, and then I'd throw in like a ton of honey. I'd mix it around, put in like cinnamon and bananas, and I'd eat that. And it worked for a while, but it just like I had to keep eating it, and eventually it made me feel really, really bad. And I didn't know, it was probably partly because of the raw grain, and then the honey on top of that, just kind of a disaster. Anyway, so I decided to stop honey when I asked my friend Joe about it. So I was at a race, and my friend Joe Conley is a founder of Veg News magazine. And I asked him about honey. I said, Joe, I'm still eating honey and I don't really know much about it. Can you tell me anything about it? And his information was that honey collecting is often very unethical, and that it's often cheaper to kill the whole hive and over harvest than it is to harvest a reasonable amount. And he seemed to also feel that health-wise, it had the problems of animal protein. Now, I haven't looked into this, but just thinking through it, there's a lot. What's involved in the honey, from my understanding, is that they're various stomach acids of the bee, and that I'm not sure, but the honey's created out of some product of pollen, which is not a human food really. So I said, okay, well, it's not particularly ethical, and I don't think I need it. Joe suggested I just use agave instead, and so I did. I made the switch. I started using agave, even though it wasn't raw and even though it was processed, instead of the raw honey. And what I noticed actually is that I felt substantially better without any honey in my diet. I think it was one of the big things holding me back for a long time, and getting the honey out was just like this incredible experience. It was like bogging me down for so long, and I didn't know it, and I couldn't really identify it. It's like when I was still eating animal products, at one point I thought I could process butter pretty well, and it wasn't until I got them all out of my diet that I realized what happens when everything you eat has fiber and when most of what you eat is carbohydrate rich. But that's my experience on honey. I don't think it's vegan. I don't think it's healthful. I don't know if it's entirely safe. And I don't think it's going to be health promoting in the long run.